What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Notre Dame, the A to Z Sports Notre Dame YouTube channel, bringing you all a little bit of some transfer portal conversation. Obviously, folks, the last time I talked to you, Notre Dame still had high hopes for potentially making the college football playoffs. We know how everything went, and I don't want to relive the tragedy that was the college football final playoff ranking. Do not want to talk about that anymore. We have eyes forward now because although it was an unfortunate ending to what was a promising season at some points, Notre Dame is now fully in the offseason after their 10-2 campaign and opting out of the bowl game. But that does have some positives to the negative, right? Like, anytime you don't win a national championship, it stinks. You did not meet expectations. I don't have to tell you all that are Notre Dame fans that are listening right now. But the positive to the timing of everything and not playing in a bowl game. And what's up, Jimmy? I see you in the chat. If anybody's coming in the chat, make sure you hit like and subscribe to the video. But comment in the chat. We'd love to hear from you conversation points about the portal talk that I am having today. But the positive here for a Notre Dame run to a national title in the 2026 season, hopefully, is that you now get a lot of extra time for the transfer portal when it opens on January 2nd and runs until January 16th. So players can enter the portal that are not graduate transfers can enter anytime. Non-graduates or graduates alike also have the window from January 2nd to January 16th. And we have seen Notre Dame get more and more involved as the transfer portal has started to become a little bit more of a known commodity. I think Notre Dame had some early apprehension to jump into the portal wave when they have the academic restrictions that they have and just the unknown circumstances of the space just in general. Like, Notre Dame is a calculated decision-making program, right? So they're not just going to jump into the fold without having no knowledge. Now that Notre Dame now has deeper understanding, what's up, Sly Fox? What's up? Now they have a deeper understanding for the expectations and how to navigate the portal effectively. I think we're going to see Notre Dame more and more use the portal to their advantage. And I actually think that this portal cycle they're about to see is going to be more heavily used than we've seen over the last couple of years. Because Notre Dame has used the portal. They've not been scared to use the portal, but it's been at a lower volume. And when I say use it more, I'm not saying they're going to overhaul a roster and have 20-plus guys, new faces on this team next year. It's not what I'm saying at all. But I will say that I do think there's going to be a slightly higher volume because we're entering a really weird, and I see questions kind of coming in. I'm going to star those, and I'm going to get to as many questions as possible because for the next 45 minutes or so, I am here to answer as many questions as possible while also talking about some transfer portal needs and some players to keep an eye out and some potential defections from this Notre Dame roster. But now that Notre Dame is going into year 5 under head coach Marcus Freeman, and we have so much recruiting classes under his belt, we are also entering the stage, and it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation for some. We are reaching the stage where it's not just players leaving for X, Y, and Z reason that are the traditional ones of entering the NFL draft or leaving for the transfer portal because they're not playing a lot. Notre Dame is now also going to have to make some calculated decisions on not overpaying players. And there's a question about a certain player that I'm going to get to in a minute here. But it is fascinating how the landscape is just completely altering, and specifically for Notre Dame. Because Notre Dame now, and it was funny, I was listening to a podcast. I think it was Busted with the Boys when Diego Pavia was on. And Diego Pavia was talking about after the season how it works at Vanderbilt, where basically they have the end of year kind of sit down meeting with their coaches, and then in those meetings, Notre Dame, the coaching staff will literally put on the table what they will give them to come back, right? So I would like to think, or I would at least be led to think, that Notre Dame probably is navigating this somewhat similarly in terms of academic restrictions and having those truthful conversations, right? So I think that all these truthful conversations are happening across the landscape. So if you do not think a player is worth the price tag that he wants or the price tag that he's getting on the market, I think more than anything now, we're going to see players say, we're out of here. right? And we're going to see teams say, I respect you. I think you did great things for the program. We'll always love you, but we're not matching that price tag because we do not think they're not going to say it directly, but they're going to say, hey, you're not the quality of play. What we're getting out of you is not that price tag. You just are not worth the price tag that you're putting on yourself. And it's, yeah, Jimmy, I think this is, I could have summed this up much more easily in these two sentences. Thank you. It looks like 1 year free agency. It's really, that's really what it has become. It is across, and they're talking about, and I'm sure there's going to be some differentiation of contract lengths and everything into the future, but it is really a 1 year contract conversation of, hey, do you want to come back? Is this worth it? Does it make sense for both sides? And that's how you navigate this process. So Notre Dame, I think, is getting a better grip on that. But also, the more talent you have on a roster, more of the truthful conversations need to happen, right? Like, because there's going to be some players that just are not worth the price tag. And there's going to be other players that you're going to say, I am going to prioritize that over this. Right? So that's really what it comes down to. So it's very interesting. But folks, questions into the chat, because I'm leaving this a little bit more open-ended. We're going to talk about the positions that I think matter most for Notre Dame. We're going to talk about players that could be leaving. We're going to talk about players that could be coming. All these things we're going to kind of keep working on through as an early primer, for lack of a better word, for the transfer portal opening up on January 2nd. Because again, there's going to be movement this offseason. There is. And we've already seen the movement starts, and not like we've seen a couple of moves that we anticipated. Jeremiah Love declaring for the 2026 NFL Draft is not a surprise to anyone that has eyes. It's so funny. I've had multiple people, and this is no disrespect, but I've had multiple people ask me over the last week or so, like, do you think there's a chance that Jeremiah Love comes back? Is there any chance at all? And I didn't want to directly answer it because that is Jeremiah's opportunity to announce that he is declaring for the NFL Draft. He has earned that over his 3 years at Notre Dame and even before that, right? So I looked at that question. I just said, guys, I'm not going to answer directly, but a running back that is being projected to be a top 15 pick and potentially a top 10 pick, there is a step that should be taken more often than not, unless there's a crazy circumstance that we're not talking about, right? So Jeremiah Love is always going to leave. He was always going to leave. He's going to be a very high NFL draft pick, and he deserves it, right? He'll be their first round draft pick since Jerome Bettis in the early 90s. They had Julius Jones that went on day 2 in the early 2000s. So they've had some good running backs. Kyron Williams has ended up being a very good player, although drafted in the 5th round. Notre Dame is had good running backs in history, but this is a historically great player who's doing some damn good things. And so shout out to Jeremiah Love. And then obviously we saw Kenny Minchey enter the transfer portal, and hat tip to Kenny Minchey. He did everything he could to try to make his mark on this program, to win the battle before the season. Just wasn't in the cards for him. He's just in a bad circumstance for starting at the University of Notre Dame. Many years, Kenny Minchey is the starting quarterback, and it's not much of a conversation. Unfortunately, he battled against a quarterback that also you don't see come around Notre Dame very often. So I think Kenny Minchey will land on his feet, and I think he'll be a starting quarterback in college football. I want to hit some of these comments before I get into my first key position that Notre Dame needs to hit in the transfer portal, when it opens up on January 2nd. So let's hit some of these. And there's some questions, so we're going to roll through a bunch of information. Actually, Matt, I'm going to hold this one because that's actually my first talking point in a couple minutes. So let's go to Mist Emil Wagner. Says, have you heard anything more about the Emil Wagner and his future? So all I can say, and I wrote an article about this, and I think other people in Notre Dame space have talked about it. So like this isn't a secret at this point, right? There is a conversation that has been happening behind the scenes between Notre Dame and starting right tackle Emil Wagner, who has 1 year of eligibility remaining. He's a redshirt junior, so he has 1 season. He is a 2-year starter and the most veteran offensive lineman you have in terms of experience, right? And Emil Wagner is a solid player. Like he's a good starting offensive tackle in college football when you compare it to the rest of the landscape, because breaking news, there's a lot of bad offensive lines in college football, right? So Emil Wagner is valuable, and why he will have a big price tag on him to either be retained or to go somewhere else. Now, initially the conversation was redshirt junior, 2-year starter at Notre Dame. He's got a great length. So, like, maybe Emil Wagner ends up declaring for the 2026 NFL draft. Well, I would be very surprised if that happens. The two things that I think are going to happen here is, one, Notre Dame decides to push for retention, and two, he comes back to college football, but he's playing for someone else in 2026. That is how I see this thing playing out for Emil Wagner. Now, I think a truthful conversation has to have with Emil Wagner because I have heard some pretty crazy numbers that he is potentially going to get in the transfer portal if he does opt to leave for the transfer portal. And honestly, if I'm Notre Dame, based upon the numbers that I saw, that are being offered, and when you consider that guys like Gerby Lamberts, Will Black are waiting their turn to be a starting offensive tackle at Notre Dame, and Charles Jagasaw potentially coming back for 2026 as well, starting inside at guard, which will kind of block out Gerby Lambert from maybe starting at right guard, depending how things work out. I think that a truthful conversation should happen. And it's no disrespect to Emil Wagner, but I don't think Emil Wagner was great this year. I think he was solid. He was a solid player for Notre Dame standards. He was a good player for college football standards, right? The standards are a little bit different and a little bit shifted. So I think that Notre Dame might have to make a hard decision and just kind of be like, hey, man, love you, but we like the depth behind you. I think there's a couple guys that are ready to play. You go get your money. And I think that's probably what's going to happen, right? Like, I haven't been directly told that Emil is definitely going to do that, but I would say that today, I think it's likely that that happens, that Emil Wagner does end up opting for other pastures, other transfer portal opportunities. I think that's the likely scenario, but I think the two scenarios that are on the table are come back to Notre Dame or transfer portal, but I heavily lean transfer portal today. That's kind of my pulse on the situation right now. All right, we had a great question, Mr. Emil Wagner. Thank you so much. Chippy James says, give me one defensive tackle and one wide receiver, then based on who leaves and who is available, make corresponding changes. So, Jimmy, we'll talk obviously a little bit deeper about this, but I agree that defensive tackle and wide receiver are two spots that you definitely need to have your attention, without a doubt. I would say that 2 defensive tackles is still my number. I hope for the development of guys like Davion Dixon, like Sean Sevillano, like Armel Mukum, who everyone that has watched me for years knows that I've always been very high on Armel Mukum, the talents, but just haven't seen it on the field much yet, although the flashes have been pretty good when he's gotten opportunities in some blowout situations. So I'm still hopeful for Armel Mukum, but I mean, you have to get at least one defensive tackle in the portal, at least. I would argue, though, 2. I would argue 2 as long as they are diverse options, right? You can't get the same guy necessarily. Like, I don't want 2 true noses in the portal. But if we're talking one nose and then one kind of penetration style player that can play 3-tech and some other alignments and different fronts, then I might have some interest. But I think we're relatively on the same page of position of needs for sure. Christopher Krause says definitely a different world with the salary cap. I mean, it is, man. It's fascinating because it's different than the NFL, because everyone's just going to say it's the NFL now, right? And to a degree, I understand why you say that with the money that implications, with the signing contract situations. But mostly around college football, you're signing 1-year contracts. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, the folks that are on Twitter or X, but there's a lot of announcements coming directly from schools that players are re-signing for another year with the player because they're treating them as 1-year contracts. So it's free agency, but on a 1-year scale right now. I do think as we get further into this, we're going to be starting to see some multi-year contracts. And that's where things are going to get messy, man. The minute that you involved agents, sports agencies in this game, this was coming. These yearly contracts, multi-year contracts. And if I'm a player, I want the yearly contracts, right? Like, I want to cash in multiple times potentially, and I don't want to get locked into a 2-year deal under my market, or you're going to renegotiate. And we're talking about renegotiation of contracts. So it is a messy, slippery slope, but this is college football in today's world without question. We have Magoo123 who says, grab some Michigan defensive linemen. I don't even know. So I scoured the Michigan roster and the 2026 class that's coming in that has the ability to leave with the Sharon Moore situation that's happening. And, like, there wasn't a lot of players that I'm like, yeah, I would go after them. I mean, it was like I listed if Aneyas Williams enters the portal, and we'll talk about running backs briefly here, but if Aneyas Williams decides to leave for whatever reason, do you go after a Jordan Marshall as an insurance, as a veteran running back? They have a nickel there that's a decent player, TJ Metcalf. Is that a player? Defensive tackle wise on the roster, there's not really anybody that I'm super excited about. I talked about the. I would have went over Alistair Vallejo again, just to try to see if he wants to enter the market on the 2026 class, but it seems like he might be sticking with Michigan. So, man, that roster is just not really as appealing to me, maybe as it has been in years past. So I actually don't necessarily agree with that. We had Matt McCarthy says, if Price declares for the draft, would you consider bringing in someone to pair with Aneyas Williams? No. Let's start here. Let's just get a couple of the easy needs out, and then we'll do deeper dives into like the bigger needs that I perceive to be bigger needs. Running back wise, if Aneyas Williams returns, even if and look, transparency again. Jeremiah Love was always going to leave. I think it's very, 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 very highly likely that Jadarian Price also enters the 2026 NFL draft. So you're going to lose 2 running backs at least. I think there's a possibility you might lose a third if Jabron Payne decides that he wants to grad transfer this offseason as well. So you could be replacing 3 running backs. So, in theory, do you need to go outside of the room for another back? I think the fact that you're bringing in Javion Osborne and Jonas Walton in the 2026 class tells me that if Notre Dame keeps Aneyas Williams, and this is dependent on Aneyas, if Aneyas stays and you have Aneyas Williams, Nolan James Jr., Keidron Young, hopefully coming back from the injury, got hurt very early before the season, so hopefully he's back in time for the 2026 year, and you have those 2 running backs coming in, I don't think you need to hit the portal at that point. Because one of Javion Osborne and Jonas Walton's going to be able to play. He is. And Notre Dame is very high on Nolan James Jr., and if Aneyas Williams comes back, he's your de facto running back 1 for the short term for sure. So, no, I don't think you need to if Price declares. If Price declares and you have another defection outside of Jabron Payne, then you probably need to at least think about it heavily. I would definitely think about it. I mentioned Jordan Marshall from Michigan. I mentioned his name because he was a Archbishop Moeller guy in Cincinnati that Notre Dame actually had for camp, and I think Notre Dame liked him, but they liked Aneyas Williams better. But Jordan Marshall liked Notre Dame. So if Jordan Marshall wanted to enter the portal and you lost Aneyas Williams, so you're down 4 running backs from last year's room, I would entertain bringing in a veteran player, a guy that just ran for almost 1,000 yards last year. He's a good player. If you paired him with Nolan James and the 2 young running backs, I think that's a really good room. So it would have to be 2 things, Matt, though, is kind of my points. If Jadarian Price declares, I'm not worried about it. If Jadarian Price and let's say Aneyas Williams enters the portal, or if Keidron Young enters the portal, I have heard nothing about Keidron at all. Aneyas is kind of one of those question marks right now. You would need at least 2 of those things to happen for me to contemplate a portal right now, to contemplate it. We had, great question so far. I might just answer questions instead of getting to my main talking points. We'll see what happens here. We had Tom who says, hey, Double R, how do you balance the current roster and portal players with the NIL 20 million restriction limit across all sports? So, obviously, when we're talking about the rev share stuff, the high percentage of the rev share that's given to the Notre Dame program in general is going to the football program. So it doesn't become as quite as tug and pull as kind of that would sound of split the whatever. I am a big advocate for retention over portal and even recruiting to a degree. I'm a big hey, my money last offseason was going to getting Jeremiah Love back. That was a big thing. And Notre Dame did that. My big thing was to retain some of the defensive players that other schools were coming after. That happens, right? I know of multiple schools that tried to come after Leonard Moore last offseason, tried to get, and obviously he didn't really entertain that, obviously. But Notre Dame does make sure that they feel good about the compensation. So retention over portal / recruiting for me. But if I had to order the 3, it would go Tom for me. Retention, high school recruiting, portal. Those are that's the sequence of how I allocate the funds that I do have in obviously the rev share model, but just pay for play model just in general. But great question. But I'm a big retention guy, man. There's a reason that you are recruiting at such a high level. You need to be able to retain the talent that you do get on the team. So, yeah, great question though. Great question. All right, I see some more people coming in. Renee, what's up? What's up? Jay Carr, how you doing? Wade Garrett, I see you. I see your questions, folks, as well. So I am making sure to star those along the way. Josh Buffo, what's up, buddy? Jumping on to all right. Brendan, I think I'm just going to answer this real quick because I talked about it a little bit. It said jumping on late, but so you see guys leaving because we asked them to take pay cuts and they refused, thinking of Great House specifically, and he got a big number last year. Brendan, it's not necessarily to ask for pay cuts. Like, I don't think Notre Dame's as much negotiating down for like what players were making already. What I'm saying is that other schools, and call it what it is, it's tampering, but like they're never going to get in trouble for it. So you can yell about tampering all you want, but like tampering doesn't actually matter in college football. It never really has, except for like the random small school that people feel like getting in trouble occasionally for whatever reason. But what I'm saying is when schools come with offers on the table, even if they didn't enter the portal, like let's say they offer a safety, for instance, let's say a team is offering them $500K to come play for them for a year when Notre Dame's paying them, let's say $150, right? That player, if money is a big component of where they make the decisions at, will come to Notre Dame and say like, hey, random school X offered me $500K. I'm going to have to consider that unless there's some way that we can meet here, of a compromise. And some of those conversations will go, we will meet you as much as we can because we want you to be a part of Notre Dame. Or some of those conversations will also go, we'll get to this point, but after that, we can't do any more. Or it'll be, I think that might be a better offer for you. Like, we can't come close to that, right? Like, so that's what I'm talking about, like with truthful conversation. This is negotiation. So I'm not saying at all, like you use Jaden Greathouse for an example. So I'll say Jaden Greathouse for a second. Whatever Jaden Greathouse is making, but for Notre Dame, and I don't know what he's making right now. I honestly don't. But if Notre Dame said you were banged up a lot of the year, you weren't like highly productive, and part of that is Notre Dame's fault, obviously. But like in theory, if they want to say, if you're asking me, would they go like, hey, I think we are only going to pay you this much next year because you stink, right? Or you didn't have a good year, or whatever. That doesn't really happen as much, right? Like, because it's a 1-year contract conversation. So I'm trying to explain the best I can, but so I'm not talking about them talking down contracts. I'm saying meeting what the other demands are in transfer portal suitors for other programs. I hope that makes sense. I know it was a little bit convoluted in that answer, but it's more about matching or trying to match what other people are offering if they're a player that you want to retain. All right. We had Quinn Kelly just said, why would Aneyas Williams ever leave? Well, I mean, there were some whispers about him potentially leaving last offseason. So, like, let's be honest with ourselves about it, right? Like, we are in an age where players are going to get compensated a high amount of money, and Aneyas is coming off a year where he didn't play as much as he did the previous year, and he's maybe a little bit frustrated about it. Like, that's me speculating a little bit, but, like, those conversations need to be talked about, man. We need to, now that we know more and more about what players are making and the availability for funds, all this type of stuff, we need to have these types of conversations as well. And I'm not coming at you, Quinn, necessarily, like in this reply, but like we need to have a conversation. Like, there's money on the table, man. There's money on the table, and some people are offering things that are just it's the world we live in. So I don't want Aneyas to leave. I don't know that Aneyas is going to leave. I'm saying if Aneyas decides to leave, this is something that you need to strategize, right? So like we're talking about like step 2 or plan B to what if this happens. That's a little bit of an escalator of a conversation. All right. We had Jerry S. Liss who says, I think Jadarian Price stays. He has a lot of opportunities to go higher in the draft in 2027. Jerry, I'm asking you, please put it in the chat because I love these types of conversations. Love it. How much higher is he going to go? A truthful conversation for a second. How much higher is he going to go? Some people think he could be a second running back off the board, potentially, around the league. Like, some people think he could go that high. Jeremiah Love's going to be a first-round pick. Jadarian Price is not going to be a first-round pick now, next year. Like, he's not going to be a first-round pick because he's a very talented runner, right? And he's dynamite speed, but he isn't a great pass blocker. He doesn't have much receiving ability on his resume, right? Like, that's a little bit of a question mark. He's a really good kick returner. That works in his favor, but he also had an Achilles injury in his past as well. So I don't think that he's going to go a lot higher than he is right now. I think fumbles too much. I mean, yeah, he fumbled too much this year, but Jadarian is going to be probably second to third round draft pick this year. How much higher is he going to go? And I know we talk about opportunities with payments and like you guys making money in college, right? Look, running back is a position that's like in the NFL. Colleges are not going to invest as much money into a running back, unless you're Jeremiah Love, as your premium positions. I mean, it's still going to work on both levels. So offensive tackle, edge, quarterback, like that's where the money's going. Even wide receiver to a degree. Like that's where the money's going in college football right now. Running backs are making good money. I mean, I know the number that Jeremiah Love made this year, or at least close to it. And he made a lot of money, man. A lot of money. So in that sense, like I'm just I'm curious, like your opinion on it. How much higher is Jadarian going to go? I don't think he's going to go much higher. I mean, could you argue that if he's let's say he's a top 60 to 75 player, so late second round to early third round player this year, maybe he has a chance to go top 50 next year. I mean, that's still a second round pick though, right? It's still day two. I don't think that's a big difference as much as some people think. I also don't think that he has like first round upside if he comes back for another year, even if he runs for like 1,500 yards. Like I don't see that outlook for him from an all around perspective. He'll also be a year older, which hurts him in the running back kind of, that tread on the tires and that long-term outlook. So I don't think he's going to go a lot higher. And I'm just preparing everyone right now. I'm not going to flat out say things, but like, do I think that Jadarian Price is going to enter the 2026 NFL draft? Yes, I do. I do. So it's just kind of where we are. And I don't think he's going to come back. I don't think he's going to come back. If I'm wrong, great. If I'm wrong, that means Notre Dame has a really good running back that's returned to school. I will not be upset if Jadarian Price decides to leave, but I also understand it. I mean, I'm on the I'm on the NFL draft side of this conversation, right? Where it's like, if a running back is ever good enough to leave early and he's going to get drafted pretty high in the process, I think he should leave. Try to get to that second contract the best you can. Like that's where my thought process is always at. All right, we'll get into some other questions here, but I'm going to start the conversation with the biggest need in the transfer portal, and I think it kicks off with Matt McCarthy, 9067. Thank you so much, Matt, again, for getting the conversation started. So do you think Notre Dame will try to hard to land both Mateen Ibaragba and John Walker? If they need two defensive tackles, you might as well go after two of the best, if not the two best in the portal. So let's start with defensive tackle. Biggest need in the portal, by far. I just did a way too early depth chart at A to Z Sports. And guys, like, on defense, I'm like, man, this secondary is sweet, man. As long as Adon Schuler comes back, you got Adon Schuler, you got Leonard Moore, Christian Gray potentially back for another season. You got Dallas Golden, you got Mark Zachary, you got Corey Adams coming in, you got Joey O'Brien coming in, you got Tay Johnson coming back. Like, that is a sick secondary, man. And linebackers, even with, I know there's a question about Kingston. I'll get to that in a few minutes here from Matt as well. Even with Kingston banged up, maybe potentially to start the year, you still have Drake Bowen, Jaden Ausberry, Jalen Sneed, Madden Faremo. Like, the second and third levels of the defense is sick, man. And defensive end is very talented. Like, man, I mean, if Boubacar Traore comes back, which I anticipate at this point, you got Boubacar, you got Bryce Young, you got Joshua Burnham more than likely, you got Logan Thomas another year into the weight program. Hopefully he takes a step forward. But then you got the freshman class that's coming in, and Christopher Burgess kind of being like a hybrid player, maybe playing some inside and out. Like, that defensive line, that defensive end group should be really good. The missing piece to this defense being elite again is, and you could argue that they might be elite without it, but the defensive tackle spot is a question mark right now. It is. You have Donovan Heinisch coming back. You have Elijah Hughes coming back. Because I know there's some conversation about Jason Onye and if he gets an extra year. Like, I don't have any information on that, so I'm not going to speculate. As of today, Jason Onye is out of eligibility, so until that changes, we'll see what happens, right? So you're losing Jason Onye, you're losing Jared Dawson, you are obviously losing Gabriel Rubio. You lost 3 of your top 5 rotation getters at defensive tackle. Like, that's the reality. And some people are going to say, and I'm sympathetic to it, Armel Mukam, Sean Sevillano, Davion Dixon, Tiki Hola, Elijah Golden, like they're all going to, like, that's the group that you need to get the most out of. And while I agree that group is very important to develop, guys, Notre Dame's trying to win a national championship in 2026. Like, they just are. And Notre Dame has money to throw around, and there is one missing big link on defense. You need some difference maker on the interior defensive line. You do. Because, look, Donovan Heinisch is good in certain situations. Good player in certain situations. In some, he's not a very good effective player. Elijah Hughes is a good rotation piece. He should not be the piece, though. I hope that makes sense. Like, you need to find a guy in the portal, at least one. Because if you have a dude and then you have the rotation of Hughes and Heinisch and then a couple of those younger guys, then I feel a lot better about where it goes into 2026. But I would argue that they need two. Like, I think they need two in the portal. I do. I think they need two defensive tackles. One guy that is a legit dude and another guy that is a good rotational piece that can play. That's what I believe. And you named a couple that are the intriguing early options. Here's the thing, though, Matt. More guys are going to enter. So I've written about both these players because, like, if I'm Notre Dame, I would have interest in both of them. They would be on my board without question. For people that haven't watched him, Mateen Igbaragba is the defensive tackle out of Wake Forest who was a Georgetown Hoya defensive player originally. So he was a FCS player and at Georgetown. And he was a 6'4", 250-pound kid. Now he's a, 6'3", 250-pound kid. Now he's a 6'3", 6'4", 296-pound interior rusher. And while his stats aren't crazy, just kind of on the naked eye, 26 quarterback pressures last year from the interior, which is a really nice number. Like, that kid can get after the quarterback from the interior, which I think is something that you need more of if you're Notre Dame. And John Walker, some people might remember from the 2023 recruiting class, Notre Dame had an offer to John Walker, who was a Florida kid that played at Central Florida. He's completely different. 6'3", 325 pounds. Like, he is a big, dense, like, more true nose player. And I think that's the key for me is if I'm taking two, which I would take two, I need one guy that is more of your physical nose type and another guy that's more of your penetration 3 technique. I don't want two of the same. Like, I don't want two noses. I don't want 2-3 techniques. I want one guy that can play the point of attack, one guy that can create some havoc in the backfield. Like that, you need diversity as a team. Like, that's what was hurting Notre Dame for a while on the interior. That has gotten better, but it still needs to take that step forward, is that Notre Dame was too similar on the interior defensive line. They were too undersized at points, right? Like, where you just like, both your guys are sub 300 pounds. No, you can't have that. And a part of this conversation, the Donovan Heinisch nose tackle thing, I've battled against this for years. That needs to stop. He is a 3 technique. He's a penetrator. Notre Dame plays their defensive start. I don't care. He's not a nose tackle. Because whether you are a big, heavy slant team or not in a 4-man front, there are going to be some times where that nose is going to be doubled. And that is not Donovan Heinisch games. There's a lot easier ways to protect him and wider alignments from getting double teams. A lot easier. So he's not a nose tackle. He's a 3 technique. Elijah Hughes maybe should be the nose tackle. That's what I believe should happen. When my depth chart projection, I left it that way, though, where I said Heinisch at nose tackle, because part of that has to be what I think Notre Dame is going to do, and I don't know anything different for why Notre Dame would do X, Y, or Z. But for those 2 players you said, though, Matt, they're on my board, absolutely. You don't have to make a decision right this second, though, because there's going to be a couple other guys that are probably going to enter the portal that Notre Dame should have interest in. Devin Tompkins just entered from USC, who's more of a 6'5", 290, 3 technique type of player. They can play some 5. They can play some 4-4-I. I'd have some interest in him. I'd at least talk to him. So we'll see what happens. But the key here is I would take 2, but it has to be the right 2. It has to be a diverse 2. But great questions. But defense tackle is number 1 for me. Number 1. You gotta find a couple guys that can play for you, man. Not just depth as in like they'll sit on the bench and never play. Like, they gotta play, man. Like, they have to play. All right. Sorry, I'm just starring some questions. All right. All right. Some speculation in the chat about Jalen Sneed. I don't know. The only thing I know about Jalen Sneed is that he has a year of eligibility left, and he's not said one way or the other. So we'll see if that happens or not. All right. All right. A lot of great conversation in the chat, folks. Appreciate it. And don't worry. Oh, Jason, I see you down there, man. We're talking about kickers. Don't worry. I don't really have a name for it, but like, yeah, man. Notre Dame needs a kicker. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, appreciate it. All right, let's go to some other questions here, and then we'll get back. So defense tackle number 1 need. I'll get to the next one after a couple questions. Magoo said, how about a bonus setup based on the fact we don't have to share the college football playoff wins? Give guys a small percentage of the $20 million if you make it to the finals and ultimately win. So, I mean, it's like an escalator in a contract, right? I think that there's some credence to that, right? Incentivizing parts of the contract. I think there's some credence to that for sure. I mean, and I think those are like those next steps, Magoo. Like that's the next step of like, we're offering you this. It can be this if you do X, Y, and Z. I mean, we see that in professional contracts all the time of like, man, if you get 10 sacks, you get this extra $100K or a few $100,000, right? So like we're getting there, man. Don't worry. That is the future. That is 100% the future. Matt McCarthy, and this is a secondary need, so I'll talk about this one now. If Kingston Viliamasa misses the first month or two, do you think that increases the odds that Sneed will return with KVA out? They're thin at experience at linebacker outside of Ausberry, Bowen, and Faremo. Matt, I don't think you... Does it increase the chances? Maybe. I mean, it might increase the chances. Because I think that Notre Dame would prioritize making Jalen Sneed come back if he wants to come back, right? I don't have any knowledge of whether he wants to come back or he doesn't want to come back. All I know is that he has 1 year of eligibility. So until he announces that he's not coming back, I am going to assume he's going to be on the roster. That's my thoughts on Jalen Sneed right now. But even if he doesn't come back, I don't think Notre Dame has to go to the portal for a linebacker or anything. Like I don't think that's a necessity because you mentioned. I mean, you have Drake Bowen back. KVA will be back at some point, I promise. Like, he'll be back at some point. But you have Drake Bowen, you have Jaden Ausberry, you have Madden Faremo, and you have a couple talented younger linebackers, man. Like, the Kias are still on the roster. I know that Bodie Cahoon is a player that Notre Dame does like. So, like, if he's your 4th or 5th linebacker on a depth chart, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be like, oh, man, we need to go out and get a 4th linebacker. Like, I don't think that that's necessarily a need, right? So, portal options at linebacker. I haven't even done any research because I don't think that matters. Matt also said, let's assume that Wagner leaves and Strouth returns. Would you try and keep Absher as insurance given Jagasaw's injury history? Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I would try to keep Sullivan Absher. I would try to keep Joe Otting for sure, assuming Ashton Craig returns from health, right? Like, you need insurance on the offensive line, 100%. But there is also still going to be a price tag there, like there is, right? Because Notre Dame has recruited offensive line very well, and there's guys that are ready and waiting, or at least waiting, right? Where you're just like, but so I did a projected depth chart of, and this is assuming that Emil Wagner doesn't return. It was left to right, and I know some people are going to hate it, starting at left tackle, but Anthony Knapp, Billy Strouth, assuming he returns, and I haven't heard anything about Billy if he's going to enter the draft, but like I think Billy, if he declares, is probably a 3rd to 4th round pick. He's a guy that I would argue that actually could rise if he has a healthy, good year next year. So he's actually a guy that I think could legitimately come back. So you have Knapp, Strouth, Ashton Craig, or Joe Otting, depending on health of Ashton Craig. Right guard, Charles Jagasaw until something happens. Like, he is your best offensive lineman if he's on the field. Just obviously there's some caveat there of if he's going to be on the field. And then right tackle, I think Gerby Lambert makes a lot of sense. Like, slide Gerby there. You maybe let Will Black be the backup at right tackle for some insurance, but also let him start getting some reps a little bit. And then maybe the year after that's when you have Will Black starting somewhere. I think that there's a lot of merits to Billy coming back, both for Notre Dame and for himself. So I would be very open to him returning. I would push for it for sure. And yeah, but I think Sullivan Absher is he's a key rotational player, so if he wants to come back and Notre Dame can make him come back, I'm 100% doing it as much as I can. All right, Christopher just asks, how is the house settlement cap working? How is there going to be balance if some people follow it and others don't? Well, Christopher, there's never going to be balance, right? I mean, look, they're going to put their restrictions. They're going to say, this is the amounts. This is the cap, quote unquote, right? Like, they're going to do those things. But as we know, college football is grimy and the alumni bases are going to find their way. You know, I mean, like I think some people in here were probably at the Irish Breakdown tailgate a couple years ago, where I told the story of Deuce Knight and like all this grimy stuff that was happening behind the scenes from Auburn, right? So like that stuff's always going to happen, though. Like it's always going to happen. You just hope that it becomes a little bit more managed, or to the point of visibility where people are actually scared that something's going to happen to them. It's just, you're asking for them to be like, the perfect answer is it doesn't really matter to a degree, because people are still going to do their grimy things, but at least there is some stipulation on this is what you get. This is how you can spend it. At least there's something, right? So at least there's something, but guidelines with no authority is still a guideless reality. So we'll see how it works out, but I just think it's an imperfect world that we're living in right now in college football. Love it to death, but very imperfect. We had Jay Carr says, did you see Notre Dame? Do you see at Notre Dame adding another safety in the portal, or are they rolling with Talich, Schuler, Tay Johnson, Ethan Long, Jadon Blair, Joey O'Brien? Yeah, Jay Carr, there's no reason to add another safety unless there's a couple defections that I don't know about right now. Like nickel is the only spot in the secondary that I have a conversation about. And I think that's a unique conversation of, one, Christian Gray returning, right? If he does choose to come back, would be important for the secondary, because that also gives you flexibility with Dallas Golden, right? Because if Christian Gray doesn't come back, then Dallas Golden's probably a part of the opposite corner conversation with Mark Zachary, right? Of like, let's see who the next starter guy is, and maybe Corey Adams figures into that conversation as well, the true freshman. But if he comes back, then I think Dallas Golden kind of settles into nickel potentially. But even if he does, do you want to bring in an insurance nickel, a guy that can come in and give you reps, or at least be a backup option in case Dallas gets banged up or you need him elsewhere? Like, I don't know. Like, but I think nickel is the only spot in the secondary that I say that's a spot that Notre Dame should maybe just at least peek at to see if there's a fit that makes sense. Like the one guy that I mentioned was Khalil Barnes from Clemson. I don't know if that's even compatible. Like, I don't know, but Khalil Barnes is a damn good nickel. And Khalil Barnes, for people that remember that recruitment in the 2023 class, number 2 on Khalil Barnes' list was actually Notre Dame right after Clemson. And Notre Dame liked him as a defensive back. Clemson actually recruited him originally as a wide receiver. Khalil wanted to play wide receiver, which is part of the reason he went to Clemson, which is hilarious that he actually ended up playing defensive back. But would you look at Khalil Barnes? I don't know that. I haven't been told that they will do that. But, I mean, I would at least have my eyes open. I think you always have to have your eyes open with just about everything. All right, I answered that from Wade on if Seed's a priority. If KVA is injured, I think it becomes a heavier priority for sure. Let me make sure that we got any other questions that I missed here. I have a bunch of star, but I want to make sure the chat I'm... All right. Man, talking. Yes, Steve. Yeah, sounds good, man. Do that. Make your money, buddy. Make your money. All right. Well, Steve also said everyone hit that like button. Appreciate you, Steve. Everyone should do that. Appreciate it. All right. All right. Yep. I think we're good on questions. So, all right. Yep. Okay. Let's hit these questions then. So, actually, let's start a conversation here. And I was trying to see if there's anybody that asked me. Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay. Perfect transition. From Quinn Kelly. Says, who's, our biggest fish from the portal? Nick Marsh, dude from Wake Forest. Obviously, Wake Forest is Mateen Igbaragba, who I talked about a little bit, the defensive tackle. Nick Marsh is the wide receiver from Michigan State. This leads me into wide receiver, though. Wide receiver is still, well, I guess you can argue kicker, but like outside of defensive tackle, wide receiver is the spot that I have my eyes closest on in this transfer portal period for Notre Dame. Been very vocal. Defensive tackle, 1 to 2. 1 at least, but I would go for 2 personally. Guys that can play. Wide receiver. I don't think it's the volume that you've needed in the past. Like a couple years ago, Notre Dame took 3. Notre Dame took 2 last year. I don't know if Notre Dame needs to go to 2 in wide receiver in the portal, but they need to go to 1, I think. I do. There's a chance that you just say, hey, Jaden Greathouse is coming back. We got Jaden. Got Jordan Faison. We're gonna roll with a X receiver spot of Micah Gilbert and maybe play Cam Williams more in that spot. And then we have some younger guys like Logan Saldate and Caden Finley configured into the conversation. Maybe Notre Dame says that. And if they do that, I would actually feel pretty good about it because that tells me like, oh, they might actually think they have something more than they have right now, at least 2026. Everyone knows that I'm high on Caden Finley. Like, I think Caden Finley is going to be a great player for Notre Dame, and he'll play in 2026, but like, is he good enough to start day one at Notre Dame? I don't know that. I haven't seen him in person yet, right? So those are the questions I have. You don't need slot receivers. You don't need Z receivers, really. But if Notre Dame went out and got a true boundary that we've seen them go after the last couple of years, Malachi Fields this past year is obviously the better version of Bo Collins the year before. I think there is some legitimacy to wanting a boundary receiver if you're Notre Dame. And I would be totally okay if Notre Dame looked at this team and said, got a lot of good wide receivers, a lot of small, shifty guys, a lot of guys that work in tight quarters, a lot of guys that can create separation of route runners. But we don't really have a ton of guys that can win at the catch point outside in one-on-one situations into the boundary. Don't really have a ton of that right now. Micah Gilbert, talented player. Love for him to get more opportunities. But also, he's been banged up a lot. Cam Williams, incredibly talented, but hasn't developed well yet. So if there is a Nick Marsh from Michigan State who's 6'3", 215 pounds, has been very good the last 2 years for Michigan State in a very poor situation. If you want to come to Notre Dame, I would welcome with in a heartbeat. It has to be the right type of receiver, though. It has to be the right type. I'm not taking a guy just to take a guy. Like, all due respect to Will Pauling, who did a solid job for Notre Dame this year, I'm not taking Will Pauling again in the portal. Not doing it. I don't need Will Pauling. Solid depth. I don't need Will Pauling. Would I take Malachi Fields again, though, in the portal? Yeah, I'd take Malachi Fields again in the portal. Would I take Nick Marsh in the portal? Yes, absolutely. I have zero idea if Nick Marsh is going to be interested in Notre Dame. Zero idea. No idea. But I would call him. 100%. If Notre Dame doesn't call him, I would actually be a little bit upset. You touch base with him at least. Like, maybe it's not an academic fit. Maybe it's just a personal, not a good fit. Like, maybe it's a horrible fit in general. But you don't know until you talk to him. You don't know until you see the transcript. You don't know all those things. So I would 100% call Nick Marsh. The other guy, even though I'm breaking my rules a little bit, because I just said I want a big boundary X receiver, and that is true still. But if I'm Notre Dame, I'm calling J.C. Brown from Kansas State, who's had 700-plus yards the last 2 seasons, averaging over 17 yards per catch. He's a smaller guy. He's more of a Z. But, guys, I'm not passing up the speed that he brings to the table. And he's been productive for multiple years now for Kansas State. He's an after-catch dynamo. He also has like 14 carries for 160-something yards in his career. So end around, jet sweep. Like, I can do so much with a J.C. Brown. So much with a J.C. Brown that I'm not really worried about him not being an X. But Nick Marsh would be first on that list. But I would talk to guys like J.C. Brown. 100%. So one wide receiver, though, is the spot that I would have the most interest in. And we'd love to hear from you all in the chat about that. Because I know there's some people that are very, we don't need a wide receiver anymore. Like, stop going to portal for wide receiver. I would love to hear if you all agree with that or not. But that's just kind of how I feel. 100%. That's how I feel. But I'm only going for a guy that is a difference maker for the team. I'm not going for a guy for just depth or whatever. Like, that's not what I'm looking for. Chris disagrees. I love it. Thank you, Chris. Seriously. I don't think Notre Dame needs a wide receiver. And I'm totally fine if that's your opinion. And again, if Notre Dame chooses to believe that as well, that gives me confidence that some of the younger guys are developing, and I'm totally fine with it. But I think you do. I think you just need one guy. Just one guy. Not talking about 2, not talking about 3, but one guy, I think. Well, Jimmy said, this is part of my problem, Jimmy. Thank you. And I think it's slightly hyperbolic, but like, I think it needs to be hyperbolic to agree. It said you have 3 Will Paulings and no Malachi Fields. That's kind of my point of diversity I talked about before, right? Like, that's why my number one spot is like, I want a big body difference maker, a boundary receiver. Because you know what that does? If I have a guy that has a difference in the boundary, we saw that a little bit this year. When we have a guy that can make plays into the boundary, that makes things easier for everybody. Because what happens when you have a guy that's into the boundary? Usually, that's where extra attention will come. Maybe a roll of extra safety over top. And then you know what that does? That leaves less defenders to navigate and cover the bigger part of the field, right, in theory, right? So that's why guys like Jordan Faison get a lot more one-on-ones. That's why Will Pauling gets more one-on-ones. That's why Eli Raritan gets more one-on-ones. Having that guy creates easy matchups for everyone else, right? So, like, that's, for me, that's what I would go after. Folks, we have over 1,200 in the chat right now, so if you all could please, if you don't mind, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to me live on Facebook or on Twitter, go over to YouTube, search Notre Dame A to Z. Come into the chat now, because I don't think you guys have noticed this. It's a lot easier to conversate for people that are in the YouTube chat than Facebook, because unfortunately the YouTubers that are in here, which is the majority of the people in right now, they don't see the Facebook comments unless I pull them up on the screen. So easier conversation points, absolutely, in Twitter. I mean, sorry, on YouTube, not on Twitter. Twitter's actually the worst one, but I appreciate you if you're on if you're on there. All right, we have AF1091. I'm just pulling up some random comments here too, folks. So make sure to put your comments and your pins in there. I'm actually very high on Elijah Burris somewhere on the rotation. He just seemed to always be open when on the field and has a little wiggle Christmas. I don't know why, but it just seems like a guy who makes a jump. And it's possible, right? Like, it's possible Elijah Burris takes a step. It's possible Cam Williams takes a step. It's possible Micah Gilbert takes a step. This is just all based on what I've seen, AK, right? Like, that's kind of what I'm working off of right now. Those guys could all make huge jumps, and you don't need a transfer portal wide receiver. But until I see it, I just can go off of what I've seen so far. So, yeah. Christopher says, how hard do you go at Nick Marsh when you know multiple teams are going after him? How much money do you apply to it? I don't know. So the money is dependent on what is being offered in the market, right, Christopher? Like, that's how you want. That's why you don't want to be usually the guy that starts the bidding, right? Like, you want to see what the numbers that are being thrown out there so that you can make a calculated offer that you put on the table. I'm talking about like the housing market for a second here, right? So I don't think that you have to necessarily go and just be like, hey, here's the money. Like, take it or leave it. Talk to him, see what's being offered, and see if it's a fit that makes sense. I mean, it's possible it's not a fit that even makes sense, but he's the type of player, though, and it's more about the type. He is the type of player that I want at Notre Dame. He's the type, without question. All right, we had Patrick who said, I think Joey O'Brien could be on the field immediately. He's the premier get. I think that Joey has a chance to be on the field very early in his career. Even with potentially your two starting safeties coming back, I think that Joey O'Brien is talented enough to make a jump for sure and get into that rotation. All right. Andrew Gilmore says, definitely need wide receivers. Thank you for your input there. Splendid Steve says, one wide receiver makes sense. Unless Greathouse leaves, then would you say two? Yeah. There's a lot of wide receivers on the roster, so I think I'm still going to stay firm to one, Steve, but I would at least have the conversation about two. Yes, I would have the conversation. Yes. All right. We had... And Andrew just said, definitely need wide receivers, get two, and move Faison inside. If that's what they want to do, I'd be totally fine with it, Andrew, but I would be okay with one, though. I'd be okay with one. Tom says, Double R, looking at the current roster and who's moving out, quarterback room could look light. If Teddy doesn't reclassify, do we add a depth quarterback? Yeah, so this is like a secondary need in some of these conversation points I'm going to have here. Because we talked about defense tackle, we talked about wide receiver a little bit more in depth, hit on nickel a little bit. Talked about linebacker and how I wouldn't even touch that. I wouldn't even have that conversation necessarily. Quarterback, I'd be totally fine with Notre Dame bringing in a transfer veteran that's just going to sit behind CJ and make sure that the room is stabilized a little bit. Because now that you lost Kenny, I know they lost Anthony Rizek as well. I mean, he's a walk-on, but like he's still an arm in the room, right? So like we're still talking about healthy arms that are at least in the room from a practice perspective. You are now down two quarterbacks from last season. And you're bringing in one for sure, Noah Grubbs, potentially two with Teddy Gerard. But I anticipate, and I put this in the depth chart that I released today, I anticipate that Teddy Gerard is a pure redshirt guy. And it's possible that both freshmen redshirts, because you have Blake Hebert, who's probably going to be the main backup for now. But I think that a healthier roster or healthier depth chart would be CJ Carr, and then you have two quarterbacks behind him. One's an older quarterback that's played, that is just, he's not a guy. But then a Blake Hebert to maybe Blake Hebert beats him out at some point in the season. He is the number one backup without question. So yes, I would have interest in it if if Teddy Gerard does not reclassify. But honestly, I would have interest in it even if Teddy Gerard does reclassify. I think that it is important to stabilize that room as much as possible. All right. So yeah, Andrew asks, Ryan, do we get a true pass rusher to supplement Traore? Well, I mean, as of now, Andrew, I anticipate Traore being back, right? So I think I'm not worried about Traore, like supplementing Traore. I'm not sure if you're talking about like coupling with him, another guy. If I'm misreading it, I apologize. I don't think you need to do that though. I don't with having Bryce Young back for his junior year, which I think is probably the big jump year most likely, with having Joshua Burnham most likely back, with having Logan Thomas now year 3 into the program, with having the couple young talented Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Abutade coming in, and then year 2 of Christopher Burgess is a little bit of a hybrid guy. I think that you don't really need to attack defensive end. It's defensive tackle that's the spot that I think is much neater. Much needed. Excuse me. Can't talk. Steve also just hit again. Hit the like button or Brian Kelly will show up and yell at you. Yes, nobody wants that. Brian is very not incredibly busy. Well, actually, Tommy says that he is busy. He's a busy golfer right now. So maybe Brian Kelly is busy. I don't know. Who knows? All right. We had Evan Martin. Again, I'm getting some more questions here. Love and Price are gone. What running backs out there have the potential to backfill the production Notre Dame would be losing, assuming Williams stays? So again, if Aneyas Williams stays, I'm not worried about bringing in a transfer portal running back because you have Aneyas Williams, Nolan James, Keidron Young coming back from injury as long as he stays. And again, I haven't heard anything about Keidron not staying. So like, as long as he stays, cool. And then you have the 2 freshman running backs, Jay Van Osborne, Jonas Walton. You're going to get at least something out of one of those guys. Like one of those guys will be ready to play. So I'm not worried about running backs if Aneyas comes back. If Aneyas leaves, though, then you have to go at least see what's out there. Like you have to. The guy that I keep talking about, and I have no idea if he's going to enter the portal or not, but Jordan Marshall at Michigan with everything that's going on. Jordan Marshall ran for over 900 yards this year. He's a very good running back. He's a guy, though, that also liked Notre Dame coming out of high school. He's a Cincinnati Archbishop Mulder kid. So if he wanted to enter the portal and he wanted to get out of there with everything going on with Sharon Moore, I would talk to him if I needed a running back. Again, though, it's very dependent on if Aneyas Williams is coming back or not. And we'll see if that ends up happening. Andrew Gilmore says, with the North Texas quarterback turning down $3.5 million, does that mean Carr is going to demand huge money? Does that eat up essentially dollars for the portal? CJ Carr is going to demand money for sure. It's not going to be that type of money though, Andrew. I'd be shocked if they're paying CJ Carr like $3.5 million next year. It's different when you are a homegrown product and you naturally accrue a raise, for lack of a better term, right? Where you're getting more money based upon the accolades and your successes, all that type of stuff, than being a guy that enters the portal for a massive payday, which means that there's a lot of other schools that are out there that are feeding for them, that are promising a lot of things, right? So CJ Carr will make more money next year than he did this year. I am 100% positive on that. He will not be hurting for money, for sure. I don't think it's going to be to that price tag where you're talking about like roster allocation problems. Like, I don't think it's going to get to that point, but that's a good question. All right. Brian Kelly jokes in the comments. I love it, man. Rumor has it that Brian Kelly is looking at Michigan because, in his words, how bad could it get? Yeah. It's pretty bad right now. So it's really bad. Yeah, turning down $3.5 million is pure insanity. That kid is good. So if someone's willing to pay him more, I get it. I get it. Tom just said Chance Tucker to the portal. I don't know if that's been, I assume that that's probably out in the universe. I'm not shocked about that. Shout out to Chance Tucker, though, man. He stuck out longer than most people would stick out in this era. And hopefully the kid can stay healthy because he can play somewhere for sure. All right. Blyberg, not responding to you in the chats. How did I miss on Jackson Dart evaluation? He's played X amount of games. After the first year, you could have said that I missed on the Mac Jones evaluation too, but then Mac Jones played more, and it turned out my evaluation was 100% on Mac Jones. We do not make determination on if someone missed or didn't miss based upon one rookie season. That is stupid and idiotic. So don't do that. So Bleiberg, shout out to you. That is a really stupid thing to say. Congratulations on you, sir. Yep, coupling. Gotcha, Andrew. I read around and clear now. Love Joey O'Brien, played wide receiver and safety and win the Heisman in the future. Hey, man. Hey. Times are changing. So if he wants to do a little Travis Hunter stuff, you do that, brother. You do it. I'm totally fine with it. If he can help my wide receiver room to a degree, whatever, man. I think he's a better safety than he is a wide receiver, but okay. Kid's good. Yep. Seems some forget about Keedron Young. I mean, it's just unfortunate with the injury. I think Keedron was going to play a good amount, but unfortunately he got hurt before the season. So hopefully he's back. So, hey, what's up, dude? How's it going? All right. JPay Penny said, are we sure Price is gone? I'm not declaring it because he has not made his intention declarative yet, but I would say it's highly likely that Jadarian Price is gone. Yes. Andrew Gilmore says, what is Jalen Snead's market if he hits the portal? I think it's a solid market. I mean, he's been productive-ish, but it's been very inconsistent, but he's played a lot of football, so there's a veteran market there. So, I mean, he could definitely play power 4 football somewhere else. I don't know exactly what the number on the market would be, though. Not sure about that. All right. Jet Irish fan just says, when could we expect to hear about Adon Schuler, Boubacar Traore, Billy Shrouth, Jaden Ausberry, Jalen Snead, etc.? So, Jet Irish, I think that the only announcements you're going to get there are the first 3 necessarily. I just assume Jaden Ausberry is coming back. I don't know if there's going to be an announcement that he's coming back. And Jalen Snead, I don't think there's necessarily going to be an announcement. The only way that you will know if Jalen Snead is not the only Jalen Snead announcement that could be that we could get, I guess, is if he ends up entering the portal, right? Which I don't know if he is or isn't. So I don't think you're going to get I'm coming back from Jalen Snead necessarily. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think you're necessarily going to get that. I don't think you're going to get one of those from Jaden Ausberry either. I expect portal opens on the 2nd, runs to the 16th. I actually don't know when the declaration thing is for the NFL draft. I should know that, but let me try to look that up real quick. I'm just looking at what the declaration date is for the NFL draft. Should be somewhat soon-ish. Actually, no, maybe not. Well, I know players in the playoffs get a longer road to it. But it looks like January 14th and the 15th is for people that are no longer playing in the playoffs to announce if they are declaring. So at the end of the portal cycle is when you're going to know for sure, most likely, all those guys that are draft eligible-ish players, if they're going to return or not. So there you go. All right. Blue and gold posted. Got it. Okay. I'm not on Twitter, obviously, right this second, so I got it. Sounds good. All right. Let's see. 30 million rosters with their current. I'm not 100% sure on that, so I don't want to comment on something that I don't have enough knowledge on. All right, let's hit some other pieces here. We're over an hour, so I'm going to roll through some of these. Brian says, what separates programs nowadays is the top programs have backup plans. They don't retool, they restock. You recruit as much talent as you can, and if Aneyas Williams, Keedron Young, or whoever else running back will be the strength for us. I mean, yeah, Brian, I think you hit on a couple key points there, is that I do think that the best programs still recruit at a high level. They retain talent, and they always have plan Bs in place in case something happens. Agree with you. Spence H. Rayback, excuse me if I'm saying that wrong. Spencer Rawback. I'm sorry, Spencer. Spence. Yep. Is there any indication of defensive players transferring? Secondary should be loaded still, along with backers and edges. Also, X receiver needs to be a priority 1. Totally fine. I think that's priority 2 for me, is the X receiver. But if that's priority 1 for you, not going to argue against it. You're going to have defections on defense. Yes, I think there's going to be a couple players that are going to enter that are going to change the formation a little bit, but it's not going to be defections of like guys that you're like, oh no, we can't function without them. You know what I mean? So, but there's going to be guys for sure that are going to enter the portal. Most will not surprise. Some maybe will surprise. A couple, I don't know. It depends on how close you've been listening to people. Patrick says, hey, Ryan, asking your opinion on how much credence is put into deciding to stay after not making the college football playoff, unfinished business, scorched earth for 2026. I think it can. I mean, I think a lot of Notre Dame players are kind of programmed that way, Patrick, of like, we heard them last year after the championship and stuff. Like, a lot of guys were pissed, man, and they went right back into the lab very quickly after the fact. So I think there's some players that can buy into that for sure. I don't think it's as prevalent as maybe it once was because of the transfer portal and pay for play and all that type of stuff. But I think there's still some of that for sure. All right, Love and Price are gone. Sorry, I already answered that question. Thank you again for that, Evan. We had DeJager Jeff, who says, how can college teams reach out to players and make offers? Are there rules for this? There are rules for it for sure. It's tampering, basically, on the college side. They're not legally supposed to talk to a player until they are officially in the portal, right? But I'm just going to say this, Jeff, and some of these decisions, I'm not talking from a Notre Dame perspective, I'm talking about where these players are transferred from. Some of them have been made for months, man. Like months, it's been decided that they're entering the portal. I was told there was a Big Ten quarterback that went into the portal a couple years ago that knew he was entering the portal for 4 months before he did. Like he got into a tough spot, but he knew he was entering for months. So in that month structure, as long as it's known information, which it becomes known because all these kids are working with agents now, and the agents put out feelers to teams, they talk to them. But how they get around it to a degree is what I just said. The agencies being involved does help to hide the player to school conversations. The parents, the agents, they hide some of the facts that happen out there, but it's not supposed to happen. But we'd be lying if we said that it doesn't happen. It happens a lot by every team too. Every team. If we're being honest, though, it's happening with every team. Slyfox says, any good quarterbacks in portal yet? I have no idea. Good backups. I really don't know, Slyfox. It's going to be someone that I don't think this is just going to pop off the screen to you because it's just like they're not coming to Notre Dame to be a starter. It's just going to be like a guy that's played a decent amount. I honestly don't know to answer that question. Cubby Blue Guru says, Jadon Blair didn't make your too deep. What can he do to get there? It's just a big offseason, man. I mean, there's a little projection that needs to happen with it. So for people that haven't seen my too deep, and sometimes two deeps go deeper than two deeps. Sometimes it could become a three deep where it's like there's 5 safeties that are too good to keep off the field, so it gets extended a little bit. But the two deep that I put out was Luke Talich. It was Adon Schuler, Luke Talich at boundary safety. It was Tay Johnson and Joey O'Brien at free safety. That's what I put out. I wouldn't be shocked if Jadon Blair is free safety 2. I wouldn't be shocked if he's free safety 3. Like, he's a very talented player, but it's always going to depend on what happens this offseason. So it's just about being consistent, man. Being consistent. Chris Mack says, Ryan, what's the move you expect that fans don't? I mean, I talked about the Emil Wagner stuff, I guess. Like, that's the move, I guess. I don't know if there's anything that's... I think there's been a lot of transparency with this stuff. So, like, I don't know if there's anything that, like, would shock people. I don't know if there's anything that, so to run it down again, defensive tackle, I think you at least need one, but I would say you need 2. I think you need 2 defensive tackles. I think you need 1 wide receiver. A boundary type receiver would be preferred for me. I think you potentially maybe need a backup quarterback, like just a kid that can just come in and hold the board. Depends on Aneyas Williams if you want to go to the portal for a running back for insurance behind Nolan James and Keidron Young and the young running backs. It's going to be very dependent. The one position that I think is interesting that I've talked, and nickel's the other one where I'm like, maybe, yeah, I'll look at a nickel, and then kicker, obviously, like kicker, maybe a punter as well. Like you need a couple of those guys, right? I think tight end's interesting, Chris. I'm not necessarily predicting that it happens, but I wouldn't be shocked if Notre Dame looks at a tight end in the portal because I wrote about it. You have Cooper Flanagan, who I like a lot, but Cooper Flanagan is a blocking tight end who doesn't have a ton of proven receiving production, and Cooper Flanagan has been banged up, obviously, right? Like, they're talking about the Achilles last year. So Cooper Flanagan coming back, what percentage of health is he back? We'll see, as he gets back into the fold, because he only played 1 game this year because he played a game and then it just wasn't ready, right? It wasn't there yet. So we'll see what happens with that next for sure. But after that, you have James Flanagan, who's a player I like, but he's going to be a redshirt freshman, played in a couple games, but he's a wild card at this point. You also have Ty Washington, who I know I'm in the minority on this one, but I don't think Ty Washington was very good this year. That's just my personal opinion, whatever. But you have Ty Washington, you have Jack Larson, and then you have the two tight ends coming in, Ian Premer and Preston Frizzell. Ian Premer is going to change a lot of things here. If Ian Premer comes in and he's a dude, he's a 5-star, whatever, then yeah, maybe that would be maybe you don't need to even think about it. But if Cooper's still kind of lingering a little bit, the injury stuff, and Ian Premer doesn't get into the summer, and James Flanagan looks pretty good, but like you're not sure if he's going to be a tight end 1 or even a high end 2 this year, could Notre Dame look at a tight end? It's possible. It's possible. I don't know. Depends who comes in and depends who they have interest in and who have interest in them. But I think that there's some intrigue there potentially. So Casey MC says, where do you see where do you see possible landing spots for Kenny Minchey? So there was a report that came out right after it that some of the schools that had interest in him were Cincinnati, Wisconsin, Florida, Texas Tech, and I think it was like North Texas or something. Florida's interesting now with the DJ Lagway stuff and him out and needing a starting quarterback. I don't know if that's what ended up going to be happening because the Philo kid, the quarterback from Georgia Tech, entered. And there's kind of some assumption that he might end up at Florida because the offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner, is obviously there now. So maybe that's him. I don't know. But there's going to be options for Kenny for sure. There's going to be options. I hope he doesn't go to Wisconsin because there's going to be like that weird Kenny Minchey revenge thing in game 1 next year. And Wisconsin's not very good. So I don't think that would be a great fit for him. Cincinnati, I would actually be kind of interesting to a degree because their quarterback, Brendan Sorsby, entered the portal. Texas Tech would be interesting, but obviously they've had at least conversations with Kenny, but I think that they're going like big game hunting, and it's no disrespect to Kenny, but like there's a couple portal quarterbacks that have come in that have proven production or multi-year starters and like that type of thing. So I think Texas Tech's going a little bit more big game hunting from an experience perspective, but I think a school like Cincinnati would be pretty interesting. I know Boston College has reached out to him at least a little bit, but there's a couple guys that they're talking to, so I don't know, but Boston College, Cincinnati, I think there's a couple that would make a lot of sense for him. All right. Tommy Gunn said, would I take a shot on Hollywood Smothers if Williams goes? I mean, yeah, I'd have interest in him for sure. I mean, he's a talented running back without question. He's a little bit more of a low volume guy because he's a smaller dude, but I think that I would have interest for sure. Yeah. All right. Let's see if there's any other questions here. Thank you, Rack. Miss you too, man. Miss you too. There's a highly rated tight end that decommitted, is what Stymie said, from Michigan. Stymie, he already committed to Texas Tech, so he's going to Texas Tech. That's actually a kid that Notre Dame recruited for a bit. The Ludwig kid out of Missouri, out of Montana. Oh, you said Montana, the thing. I can't think. Sorry. Yep, he's from Montana. All right. All right. Oh, man, Beefeater's asking the deep cuts of like, sorry, I missed this. Where do you think Anthony Rizak and Chance Tucker land? I have zero idea, man. I'm probably never going to have any idea there. I'm probably never going to have it. So, all right, folks. We're well over an hour. I was going to keep this to 45 minutes, but it went deep. Went deep here. Before you get out of here, if you're listening to me live on YouTube, make sure to hit like and subscribe. If you're listening to me on Facebook, you hit the like button over there and share it onto your feed. But if you want to go over to YouTube, would be very appreciated. Again, Notre Dame A to Z Sports. You can search that. If you're on Facebook, please do the same. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you all. This is going to be a weekly occurrence, by the way. Every Wednesday, noon Eastern time, I will be live. So make sure that you hit that notification bell to know when the next show is coming. Thank you all, though, for joining me for some Portal talk. I'm sure we'll have a lot more of it over the next few days. And as always, go Irish.